Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a concept that I like to call imaginary chords. Now that's not the real term for these chords, but bear with me because I think you'll get it. So these imaginary chords, there's something that I learned from the song Burn All Your Witches by Antemasque, for those who are familiar with the Mars Volta and its offshoots. And this is a song that has like an interlude with these really low sort of rumbling chords. And I was really confused because I was like, what are those chords? Like I recognize the shape, but I don't really recognize the sound. And so this was something that I thought about for a while, and it wasn't until I really got deeper into music theory that I was able to say, okay, I get it. So these chords are going to help you, especially when it comes to playing in the lower sort of range of your guitar, but you can use them elsewhere too. So before we get playing on this guitar though, we're actually going to switch over to the bass. So for what might be an unexpected move, we're going to use a bass to talk about chords, but this is a 5-string bass, as you can see, which is, a little less common. 5-string bass is an extended range instrument, and a 6-string bass being that too. A 6-string bass has a high C string, but a 5-string bass has just the low B string. And this low B string gives you a little bit of extra room to move on the lower end of your instrument. So if we go like, but then, so you have your E, which is usually the lowest note on both your guitar and your bass, but now we also have a low B that sits below it. And this note is so low that like if your bass isn't plugged in, you're almost not even going to hear it. And you can see like how much the thing wobbles. It is low. And it's like sometimes even a little difficult to use. It's a great statement note, like if you're playing bass and then you just want to like rip that thing. It is so low. But guys, who are in like heavy metal bands, like you can do all kinds of real low stuff there. But here's what to remember is that if we have an E major chord on guitar, it would be played like this with the E. Off of our E string. That's what it sounds like. If we even wanted to play more like a bar chord version, we could do that up here. And that sounds a lot more like a guitar, right? And you get just that nice, pleasant sound. But hold on a second. What if we took that E shape and dropped it down one more string? So what if we did that same chord, but now based off that B string? We have our dominant chord, like an E shape right beneath our normal E shape. But like we had this, so too do we have that, which is like so low that, harmony with this low, the overtones start to get really muddy. So this is not something you would really use in any serious sense. It's a little crunchy and chunky, but there's a point there, and it's that if we have an E, below it we also kind of have a B. And even though we don't have this B string on our guitar, we can still pretend that we do, in an imaginary sense. So now we're back to the guitar here, and we don't have our B string anymore. But it's still there in spirit. We can still imagine it if we were. So where we have our E, like we were playing earlier, what if we still just drop that shape down? It's still there. That's still that B. We don't have that B string anymore, but it's still there. Now, granted, the downside of this chord is because of the way that the guitar is tuned. If we have our B here, our next open string past the triad is going to be a G, which is a little crunchy against this. Kind of wants to resolve a little bit, unless you're feeling like playing something with a sharp 5 in it. But if we bar it, you can have the 6th. So if you ever find yourself wanting a B6 chord. But just as we have B, so too a half step do we have C. And this is one of the lowest voicings you can have of C on the guitar. It's probably, you know, close, I'd have to think it is the lowest voicing, because like you can consider like this voicing, if you have the E in the bass, you could consider that a first inversion C chord. And that would technically be probably like the lowest voicing really, because you already have the lowest note on the guitar. But as a like complete closed voicing, this is probably as low as it gets. I can't think of anything else. And so it's all here. And in this case, this G is no longer an enemy. So you have that. And we have an open B string and an open E string. So if we play the whole guitar open with this, we actually get a C major 7 sound. Which is a nice, interesting sound. So now we also have D, which this G is no longer offensive like it was in our first example, but it is like a sus4 or like an 11 kind of sound, so it wants to go somewhere, like wants to resolve to the 3, but it's still fine. And then we have our E, which is technically the same register as this E, right? So we're like back to where if we were playing a bar chord E, that would be, you know, on the bass, that would be where we would find it, right here. And then we would have our imaginary fret with the E on that B string. And of course we have all the chords in between too. We also, between B and C, then we have a D flat, which is nice. We also have an E flat, which is really nice, and the G string now again is in play. With the D flat, that G is very mysterious sounding. It kind of gives like a Lydian vibe because that's a sharp 4 of this chord. So we have our 5, but we also then have that sharp 4. So we have a really interesting swath of chords here at the lower end of the neck that have a rich sound to them. And especially, I think, if you have an arrangement that you're making, like let's say the guitarist is playing E, like that's great. But if you're the second guitarist, should you be playing that, or should you maybe play down here? Or better yet, let's say they're playing C, where like, oh, I don't know, where else should I play C? You could, sure, you could play that, but it's a little, you know, open, little cowboy chord for you, but maybe you want to like dig in a little lower so you're out of the way of their sort of upper sound. That's where I think these have a place, because you can really work in like the lower register and have a whole option. Now you also, don't forget, then have a dominant chord right below your tonic chord if you're playing in major. So like let's say we have this, like let's say in G, you get that D which is nice. So it gives you some options for when you're playing. If you want to hit a dominant chord real quick to like... So that's 1, 5, and 4 in A, but all staying as if we had a B string beneath it. And so that gives us just a little extra flexibility there. So as I sort of alluded to, these imaginary chords, imaginary is not really what we would call them. That's just how I like to think about them. What they are, you could think of two things maybe. The first thing that you're going to probably want to call it is an inversion. And what this is, if we think about this B again, here we have F sharp, we have B, and we have D sharp. That's all a B major chord, but it's with the F in the bass, meaning that it's in second inversion, with the fifth in the bass. So with this, it's really just a second inversion chord, nothing special. But another way you could think about it, this is probably not technically correct, but it's kind of how I've been alluding to thinking about it, is as a rootless chord, or like a chord with an implied root, rather. So we can imply roots for chords depending on how we're playing, and especially like given the tonality of what we're doing. So chords, especially more complex chords, will have other chords sort of like built into the upper structure of the chord. So if we're talking C major, and we think C major 7, C major 7 is C, E, G, and B. And with that, you'll recognize C, E, and G as your standard C major chord, but then E, G, and B are an E minor chord. So we really have two chords nested into the same chord. And you could think of this almost as a E minor over C. And when you play like a major 7 with this shape, that kind of is illustrative of that. Now, if we were in a context where C was the tonic, and the whole band is playing something, like let's say you got a keyboard and a bass and everything, and let's say that they all went to play C and like resolved from G to C, that maybe if you played E minor while everyone else was holding down the lower end of the harmony, you're playing that upper structure. You're implying that our root is still C, ultimately in the grander harmony, but your E minor is sort of sitting on top as that upper structure to give us that C major 7 sound. So there's also plenty more cases where this applies, especially with more complicated chords like diminished chords that can be looked at as rootless or implied root for dominant chords. It can get as complicated as you want. But I think that's not quite what we would call it here. Like I would say squarely, if I was going to describe this to someone, it's an inversion. But I think the way that you can think about it, though, is as if you had a B string here, how would you play? Like what would be the chords that if you had a fourth below what you have now on your guitar, how would you play differently? What chords would you play differently? And I think that's where these ones really can shine. So that's all we have for today, guys. I hope this was helpful. I know it's not maybe the most advanced stuff, but I think it's a good reframing and it gives you a little bit of extra mobility, especially lower in the fretboard and when you're trying to fill out in a production. So if you like this, let me know. If you have questions for more music theory stuff, let me know in the comments, because I love music theory and I want to talk about it all the time. No one else that I know does. So like, throw me a bone here. I really want to talk about music theory. I'll let you know anything I know. But anyway, that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye.